Could be.
Zoning ordinance. This is the zoning ordinance of productions that indicate what the alternate village plan and what the cluster plan were originally designed to do. One, as you'll see, allows 50% development on the open land, and the other limits the development to 20%, keeping 80% open. Read those and pass them along, and I will give you the next piece. I don't want to take them out of sequence because I don't want you to lose the concept of development here. This particular thing is what the planning board has characterized the two development plans as, saying that they are redundant. So I want you to read what they say.
They're saying that the cluster and the alternate are redundant,
No, the planning
the-
board is.
the original- the original and the new one.
That is the zoning ordinance.
Right,
For both the alternate plan and
right,
the cluster plan.
Right.
And as you see that I've underlined there, the cluster
Yeah, I
plan
get
allows
that.
development of up to 50% of the developable property.
Right.
The alternate plan restricts it to 20%, leaving 80% open. So
no, I
you get-
understand that.
Okay, so that's all I wanted you to get out of that. That's what the original regulation says.
Yep.
Now, this is what the planning board says that they want to justify eliminating the alternate village plan by claiming that
Yeah.
it's redundant.
Okay, got it.
So the point is, if we vote no, we maintain both options.
Correct. But that's not what I'm here for. Basically, I'm just here to provide you with the information so that we can then decide what the Conservation Commission should do to alert the citizens, how we can do it with the time that's available, and whether or not we should. That's basically, but I want you to be completely conscious of what the issues are before you make a decision.
Chairman,
Yes,
at some point, I would like to address your board and provide them with some information.
when we get to that point, if you wish to speak, that's fine with me, but
Thank you.
you'll have to wait.
I'm just alerting you to the fact that.
No, I figured you
I'm
weren't
not
here.
To just listen.
Yeah, I figured you weren't here for that.
Do we need to do a roll call meeting to order?
Yeah, we do.
Yes,
It's a formal meeting.
I want to get this going though. So, okay, let's have an attendance. Sue Hagenberger, Leah Davis,
Hagerman.
you here?
Yes.
Jay
Jay Wellens, I'm
Wellens,
here.
Jerry Tice. And we're gonna forego reading the minutes and all that stuff, so we'll take care of that on the 3rd.
Thursday. David, are you here as community member or planning board chair?
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
This third thing is the way the warrant articles for voting on the 8th of March are listed. It's Article 4. And you'll see that the planning board recommends
Take over.
that
Thank
the
you.
voters delete the alternate
What?
village plan by a 7-0 vote.
So you're here as a community member or public board rep or both?
I'm here as a-
Sure, put those together.
You go.
Now, this next article that I'm passing out is something that was written by Paul Mirsky, who as a representative of in Enfield here for 8 years, was in part responsible for this warrant article, creating the alternate village plan to be eventually passed in the legislature in Concord and adopted in a warrant article here in Enfield. He has written this and has submitted it to the Valley News. for publication in their paper.
Do we have copies of that, or is that the same one that was written to the planning board?
I think it probably was the same one that came to the planning board, but the Valley News will be publishing it shortly. I don't have any additional copies.
We can put in a.
Here it is.
Here, what is?
Paul's letter.
Oh, okay.
It's also on the list of.
Oh, it's the
Yeah,
same one
it is
there.
the same one.
I don't think it's the same. It's the one to the listserv, but I think it's different than the one to the version.
It's the same thing.
Oh, okay. No, the one to the listserv is different then.
Yeah. Thank you.
One here.
So you might as well get started on this. This is a letter that was written to the planning board by Tim Jennings, regarding his evaluation of the two different plans.
Here you go.
This is some more information from Paul Marsky. His impressions.
That was already-
Already saw that?
Yeah, that was in one of the other documents.
Is this separate from the letter, just for minutes, say the additional information from Paul?
No,
It was already.
It's part of the
Yeah,
letter
part of,
already.
one of the things already passed around.
Okay.
This is something that I have written, which if the planning board agrees, I will also send.
I read that.
Huh?
We've got that.
You
already.
got it? I sent
Yeah.
that to all of
You
you?
sent that.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, you don't need it again to read? All right, good,
we did our homework, Jerry.
great.
I have copies? One for Kate, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is that letter a formal letter or is it just a write-up of?
This is a draft of something that I'm waiting to see whether the planning board or the Conservation Commission is in favor of me sending on. So it really doesn't need to be incorporated into the minutes until, in fact, we vote on what to do and when to do it.
Jerry, you might want to spell conservation correctly. so that-
I'll correct it when it gets time to be corrected. My copy.
Oh, yeah, I'm all set with that. We have the-
To Jenny's letter.
Yes. Jen's letter.
I'll get it. Oh, thank you. So we have all finished reading the material that I passed around. Okay, so my impression of this material is that the two plans are not redundant and that the planning board has misled the citizens in writing their justification for voting yes on the warrant article number 4. I want you to decide whether you think that's the case or express your views as to whether it's not. So we can decide whether we have a majority of people who feel that the plans are not redundant and that the planning board has misrepresented the warrant article justification.
It appears to me that they're different, just from my view, based on the amount of land that is allowed to be preserved. So it being different, it provides two different options for the town to move forward, when there is a need to utilize it. So it appears to me that they're different.
I remember discussing this, the original time these options were developed. It was clear to me at the time.
Could you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I remember when this was proposed originally in our zoning. The two options were proposed differently. I think that they're entirely different options, and one, the cluster results in a layout like the condos in Grantham up on the hill on the left-hand side as you're going north.
Yep.
Where there's a fair amount of open land, but the condos are spaced out so that there's not a chunk of contiguous land that is undeveloped. A village plan, I think, is a better use of land for resource management and for conservation purposes. It's also less costly to build, and it's also less costly to serve in terms of resources such as fire and sewer and so forth.
Lee?
I totally agree that they are different, and I agree with everything that Sue said, that was basically what I was gonna say about the cost of servicing these areas. I would like to say, though, I'm not quite sure, I don't think the planning board was trying to fool anybody. I'm not quite sure why it's so important to delete one of these. That I don't understand, because they are different. So I vote that yes, they are different and that they should be upheld.
And I think it provides far more flexibility for developers to choose one or another option. If they're going to do some kind of multi-unit dwelling plot.
And especially with development having been flat for 10 years, it's bound to change, especially with the environment the way it is now. So having that extra option available it allows for mindful development in a way
Yes.
that is beneficial for the town.
Lee? I'll read you something that was in the planning board. During the meeting, member Gotthard recommended removing the village plan alternative from the ordinance on the grounds that it is confusing and redundant. The argument against both of these assertions has been made above. So some of the planning board members felt that the two were redundant and confusing. I didn't find any confusing thing about them.
I didn't either.
But this is
Absolutely
what one of the members said. Whether he influenced the others or not, I don't know. But that is the narrative that is supporting a recommendation by the planning board to vote yes on Article 4 to remove the village alternate plan from zoning ordinance.
I think it's really important that we don't impute motive or intent or personal feeling into our position on this. I just see these as two different and creative alternatives for developers to develop a large tract of land with multiple dwellings.
Yes, I think that's what we're here for, is to keep the options into the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I would like to, and was there a discussion among the planning board members about the difference? Did they
Well, why
discuss?
don't we ask Mr. Fry?
Did they discuss? Because it's so obvious that they're different.
May I sit up here, please?
I don't care. You can sit wherever you want. We can hear you.
Thank you. Yes, there was quite a good discussion during the several meetings when changes to the zoning ordinance were discussed. And there was quite a good discussion at the planning board meeting last week. Your chairperson attended, as did Mr. Tim Jennings. And I thought we had a very good and productive discussion. One thing that I think all agreed on is that redundant was perhaps not the best choice of words.
That was that, yeah.
And I wrote it quickly. And that had been a term that we were using in our internal discussions. And 2020 hindsight says that probably was not the correct choice of words. I think the majority of our discussion last week centered around the confusion and intent of the two ordinances. I have, Mr. Chairman, if I may pass these around.
Of course. Right.
I'm going to keep one for
You want me to
myself.
help you?
Please. What I have done is taken a lot of the features of the two ordinances and explain and laid them out in the chart.
This is good.
And I'd like to go through them with your permission, one by one, and explain why the planning board feels that the village plan is not the superior of the two ordinances, which is what Mr. Mursky has stated in his opinion. Let me preface this by saying that clearly the fact that there is discussion about what the village plan ordinance actually says is indicative of the fact that it's ambiguous. I stated last week, and I will state for your benefit, I have been on land use boards for some 20 years. And the whole idea of zoning ordinances is to have a specific statute and set of guidelines which the facts of each case can be applied to. So if an ordinance hypothetically says the setback can be whatever it wants to be, we would have to say, okay, the setback is whatever it wants to be. And developer A says, I want my setback at 15 feet on the sides and the back. And then the next developer comes along and says, I want my setbacks at 5 feet. And you gave 15 feet to this guy, I want 5. There's nothing in the ordinance that says one way or the other, so give me 5. We don't have a standard by which we can make decisions. And the same goes for the ZBA, because they're a quasi judicial body, and they are kind of held to a higher standard than is the planning board in making its decisions. So let's go through these one by one. First is availability or applicability of the ordinance. The village plan just says it's there. It's encouraged. It's not required. The cluster development says it is required where there are 10 or more dwelling units. It shall be a cluster development. So automatically, if you've got somebody who is proposing a 10 or more unit development, they have to do a cluster development. No ifs, ands, or buts, unless they go to the ZBA and get a special exception. Open space. Here the two ordinances differ. Village plan says 80% open space. Cluster development says minimum of 50% open space. Could be more, cannot be less. And you know, those are numbers, they can certainly be debated, and I'm sure when, after the master plan has been adopted in 6 months or whatever it is, we'll be moving on to making some changes in the zoning ordinance, which reflects the will of the people. And I'm sure that number can be debated and can be changed. Dimensional requirements. Dimensional requirements are lot size, setbacks. In the village plan, there are none. You can have 0 setbacks. So my house can have 0 clearance next to your house, or it can be 5 feet, or whatever the builder wants. The building setback from the perimeter of the original lot can be up to 2 times whatever is specified in the zoning regs for that district. In the, I think I lost something in here. Okay, the line's in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So,
We figured that out.
excuse me?
We figured that out.
Okay. So in the cluster development scheme, the lot size and setbacks can be reduced by up to 55% of the district requirements, which is a specific standard that the board can react to, and it can impose it. There has to be a 100-foot buffer between any building lot, not just the building, but the building lot, and the perimeter of the tract that you're subdividing. Utilities, village plan does not address them. Cluster development says all utilities must be underground, which in my book, that's a plus. Other thing about utilities, which I did not put down, if you have a very high density of housing, you're talking about the very strong possibility of having to have a private community water system and a private community septic system. The exception being if the property is on town sewer and town water. Those can be expensive, and they're regulated by the state. And there's a lot of additional paperwork and reporting and expense to having community septic and or water systems.
Who's the expense?
It,
The developer?
well, ultimately, the people who buy the houses. Because they would be the ones that would have to, you know, bear the expense of complying with state regulations. There'd have to be some sort of a mechanism for dividing up the expenses. Which, you know, again, it's not spoken to at all in the village plan alternative. Common land. The village alternative plan says the common land has to have an easement to the town for certain uses. And it doesn't speak to who owns the land. Is it the developer? Is it the homeowner? Is it some third party? Don't know. In the cluster development, the ordinance calls for a mandatory homeowners association, which owns the common land, it manages the common land, and it apportions the expenses which include the tax assessment. It apportions those expenses to the people who own the individual lots. Another advantage of the cluster development is that the planning board has the option of designating the areas that are common land, which, depending on the circumstances and the developer, could be a good thing for the town. In some circumstances, it could be a good thing for the developer. But at least there is, there is the thought that the planning board can designate where the common land should be. And again, as I said, the taxes are assessed either directly or indirectly to the lot owner. Usage. The deeded easement to the town restricts usage to agriculture, forestry, conservation, or public recreation. It doesn't say who is going to manage these activities, who's going to benefit from any profits. It's just, how do you interpret that? Having the easement go to the town is fine. But, what happens after that? And, the other, for public recreation, underlying public, the homeowners get to have a say in that. So, good point there. Under cluster development, the common land is reserved for recreation purpose by the homeowners, by members of the homeowners association. It's their land, they pay taxes on it, they can decide how it's used. Sounds pretty fair to me. And it's not open to the general public either. Size of the common land. 80% in the village plan alternative. And again, that's a number. But the size of the common tract piece or pieces are not specified. In the cluster development, the minimum size for common land or pieces of common land is 3 acres. That guarantees you that you're going to have at least 1 3-acre parcel. And it also specifies a width to depth ratio not greater than 4:1, which also helps keep that tract of land usable rather than a narrow pathway. The cluster development says, access should be direct from the backyards or side yards of the largest number of lots. And for lot owners that, for whatever reason, due to the layout, can't have direct access from their property to the common land, there has to be a 50-foot access created. Density, not greater than the district, that's the same for each. Construction detail, there's a paragraph that cites that the exterior walls of all the buildings have to be per New Hampshire fire codes. Cluster development is silent on that because we have a building inspector who follows New Hampshire fire code. So why it's in there, I don't know, but it's there. So those are some of the compare and contrast issues with the two plans. And the cluster development, while the number is 50% as opposed to 80%. The cluster development provides a much easier to administer zoning ordinance. And that's why the planning board feels that cluster development ordinance should be kept. Village plan alternative, which well-intentioned, not particularly well-written, should be dropped. I think both of these two options carry out the land use policy of the plan, of the town plan, and of the residents of the town, which is maintain the open space resources that we have for wildlife, recreation, hunting, hiking, agriculture, whatever. So there's no change in town policy because it's the same for both. And I can assure you, having worked for over a year on the master planning task force, that the will of the residents of this town is to keep a lot of space open. And certainly that's, that's a worthy goal. And we think that the cluster development ordinance provides a better and more complete tool than does the village plan alternative ordinance. In closing, no, that's about all, really. Any questions?
Yeah, I have some comments.
Please.
First of all, nothing you have said makes it imperative or difficult for the planning board to discuss issues regarding development, even if the alternate plan is there. You haven't said a thing that really denigrates the alternate village plan. It is an option. That's something that is always better if people are going to make intelligent decisions, is to have options. Second of all, you've misrepresented the idea about the alternate village plan. It says here, the recorded easement shall limit any new construction on the remainder lot to the structures associated with farming operations, forest management operations, and conservation use, and shall specify that the restrictions contained in the easement are enforceable by the municipality. Public recreation uses shall be subject to the written approval of those abutters whose property lies within the village plan, and alternate subdivision portions of the project at the time when such a public use is proposed. So the alternate village plan offers the opportunity for not only 80% of the developable land to be served, but it also offers the opportunity for that particular portion of the land to be used by the community. And it provides the developer with various, or the property owner with various uses of his property that he may not otherwise have if the alternate of the cluster plan is the only one that's available. Second of all,
Can I respond
no,
to that?
let me finish. I
Okay.
need to talk for half an hour. Let me finish.
12 minutes, Jerry.
12 minutes.
Let's keep it civil,
Okay, I'm civil.
dispassionate.
I'm dispassionate. I'm just pointing out errors in everybody. The other thing is that the alternate village plan offers a taxability that is no really different potentially than the cluster plan, because the cluster development plan is going to require a homeowner's fee. And that fee can be several $100s a year. The taxes associated with the alternate village plan, because the lots are smaller perhaps, may offer a less of expense to people who buy homes in that area. Again,
I think that's
the option,
speculation.
pardon?
I think that's speculation.
Well, so is what he said too. The point is that homeowners' fees, if you look at them, are involved with a whole bunch of things that concern everybody taking care of the land for the price. They don't have to maintain their property, they don't have to do anything, but they have to hire somebody that they all have to pitch in to help.
That's correct.
So that's right. So the idea that the village or that the cluster plan is going to somehow save people money is not necessarily true.
I never said it would save money.
All right, fine.
So
Um,
my question is, why don't we keep both and improve the village plan ordinance?
because it is ambiguous, subject to, as we're trying to do here tonight, subject to varying interpretations. And as such, down the road, it's likely to cause headaches for the planning board, for the ZBA. And if somebody wanted to push it to not environmental court, but to the Superior Court, it would probably be, what, $10, $15, $20,000 in legal fees that the town would have to spend defending a suit. Again, because of non-specificity in the ordinance.
Can I answer the legal question? Because it's actually a very easy answer. Enfield adopted the village plan in its entirety, subject to the RSA. And the RSA is a state RSA, and Enfield cannot change that. So even if you did all of the lobbying and the work to improve upon it, so that it was more specific and it served the needs of our community better, we would still need to go through a process.
So could we
You cannot
replace it?
change the law.
Could we replace it?
You could replace it, yes, but, and we do all the work for that. And if you guys wanted to do that, certainly that's an option, but you can't change a state law on a municipal level, right? You could write a separate ordinance, but you would repeal this one and you would do a full rewrite.
So
Okay.
my recommendation would be we put together an improved village plan ordinance before we repeal the current village plan option.
If someone takes it in the meantime, then they would have free range of all the items that aren't specific. So this is a very developer friendly, village plan is very developer friendly. It is not as environmentally friendly as cluster. And I think it's been pitched to they'll group everybody all together, but there's no requirements. So they always draw you a picture that looks just like a cluster plan, but in fact you can go and it counts front yards and side yards. And so I have concerns for the animals and passages and things that you guys probably do. And I think we had these discussions on planning board as well. So we couldn't sit there as a planning board and say, no, that won't work because the RSA doesn't prohibit it, right? So you're giving a free pass to people to build something that's much different than what people are imagining.
So I think, like for me, what was not clear, the village plan is what applies to a 10+ dwelling unit, like the cluster plan. Is that right? This is what you're
It's
talking
not
about?
stated.
It's what?
It is not stated.
No, it's not stated, but that in fact is what it was. You don't know, okay,
If it's not in the ordinance, it doesn't exist.
okay,
That,
okay.
so the planning board and the ZBA and the state court have to interpret what is written in the ordinance. If it's not written in the ordinance, it causes tons of confusion. And the idea is to eliminate confusion, keep the town out of court. Because that's very unnecessary. It's an unnecessary expense to the taxpayers. Jerry, could you please summarize again your first point? Because I've kind of forgotten the details of it, and I would like to respond.
Well, my first point was the fact that the 80% of the property that has to be left open is available for public recreation.
Okay, right. So again, the village plan ordinance is silent, does not say who owns that land. And if it's available for public recreation, then you get into all sorts of questions like who manages it, who's responsible for it. Is it the town that holds the easement? Is it the homeowners association? I mean, as a homeowners association.
Easement is not ownership, though. That's just the rights.
Exactly. But if hypothetically, if the common land was open to public recreation and somebody broke their leg, are they going to sue the town or the homeowners association? I mean, can you answer that?
Yeah, it says right here that or 20% or less of the entire parcel available for development shall grant to the municipality within which the property is located as a condition of approval, a recorded easement reserving the remaining land area of the entire original lot solely for agricultural, forestry, and conservation, and for the public recreation. So the municipality gains control of the other 80% of the property. And they can, as a result of that, institute their own limitations as to what can be done there. Maybe they don't want hunting there because there's houses around. Maybe they don't want motorcycle tracks around there. Maybe they don't want off road vehicles. That is granted in the alternate village plan to the municipality.
Mm-hmm. And would you like the municipality taking your common land and saying, I'm going to give it to a logger and allow, you know, a tree farm there, and then every 10 years, the logger comes along and clear cuts? That's not going to make people very
First
happy.
of all, clear cutting is limited to a certain percentage of the property that's open. Second of all, the Fish and Wildlife Service does a rotational clear cutting service on its own property because the diversity of habitats improves the diversity of wildlife. You have a climax forest all over the place. You limit significantly the number of habitats that are available to other animals. So by cutting forests, you allow bushes to come up, which encourages rabbits and smaller rodents, which provide food for the foxes and the coyotes. So you create a food chain in an ecosystem that a climax forest doesn't have. So there's nothing wrong with removing trees and opening up land at all.
What's wrong, if I may again say this, what's wrong is that giving control over private land to the government just does not sit well. By government, I mean the town.
Mm.
That's an option that the developer may use or may not use. It doesn't mean that the two can't coexist as options for people to develop property. Maybe the owner of the property doesn't want to control the land anymore. Maybe he wants to get out of paying taxes on it, so he can give it to the municipality, and that's the end of his tax burden.
But he is not giving the land, he's not deeding the land, he's just deeding an easement.
Fine, and he can use it, he can claim its current use.
It's a
Well,
content use.
This- this
Again,
debate
you
can
know,
go on for
I
all
don't,
night.
I don't think we're gonna reach agreement
No,
on the subject of whether or not the common land owned by the homeowners should even have the option of being out of the control of the homeowners association.
there is no homeowners association in the Alton Village.
Well,
Plan.
there's a
It's only in the
problem, too.
cluster plan.
There's a problem too, if you've got community sewer and water, if you've got private roads. This just opens up a can of worms. And if you eliminate it, the can of worms disappears. And I have a question for Kate. The ability to have the village plan alternative is in state RSA.
Yes.
I understand that. The town then had a choice to adopt that as part of its zoning ordinance or not adopt it. And if I understood what you said before, we can't get rid of that ordinance that we have adopted.
If you adopt the RSA in its entirety, you can only remove it, right? So say in a town meeting, you wanted to do two together, like you could, you know, when we change the name of a fund, right? And we do that from time to time because things change. So you change it from the ABC fund to the DEF fund, and you flow the money from one to another, right? So you dissolve it, you create the new one, dissolve the old one, and put the money into it. So there are things like that I cannot answer. I'm not a lawyer in terms of how that would work, but you would work with the town manager's office and he would consult with our lawyer to make sure that we're doing. So if you have a strong interest in this kind of preservation, I think it's very, very important, right? But there's no guarantee you're not going to get a golf course, a pickleball court, a running track, right? None of those are prohibited uses. Those are recreational uses. So I think, you know, there's what people wish the village plan was, and then there's what the words actually say. Because I think aspirationally, the village plan is a nice idea. And I understand why people in their heart really want it. And I mean, I bought land just to preserve it. So I think there's that piece, but then there's also the piece of, is the government the best steward of land that would be otherwise private? And I think the voters have to answer that question for us, but it's a concern, right? Because there are times that some of us don't agree with things that the government does. And there's nothing the planning board can do to prevent it. If you leave this option open and someone wants to do this and do a development that isn't maybe the most agreeable, we will not win. And so, I mean, and that's fine if that is something, if you're pro-development and you want to see things that maybe aren't as downtown organized, because I think people think village and they think like cute little cluster, right, with like a nice little field. And that's unfortunately not exactly what the language says. You know, people will draw you a picture one way, but it isn't. The legal language just wasn't typed out. And you can certainly call Ed the town manager and work with him on it. I will also tell you, if you can't tell people to vote no as a committee, right? You can tell them privately, you can tell them your feelings, but you can't lobby people for a specific vote. The Attorney General's office comes in as US staff. Kaden hasn't happened to them relatively often, but so the planning board would not tell you vote yes. They are putting this on the ballot for people to make an educated decision. It's a great conversation, right? I mean, I learned a ton. So I just things to think about.
Thanks.
This was helpful. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, it was.
unless there are any more questions, relinquish the floor, as it were, and folks can carry on your meeting.
Thank you for your time.
I thank you
Time.
for allowing me the time to present a different perspective on the issue.
It was.
It's a fuller version. It's a fuller version of the picture.
There are two sides to every story. And
I think the history of the adopting the RSA is a whole other level of complication that wasn't before very clear.
And if you want to see, all of the planning board meetings are on YouTube. You can watch them all. So, you know, when someone gives you a snippet, usually there's a larger piece. And the YouTube videos that come from in here are pretty clear, except when I join, I'm too loud because
only once.
it's for whatever reason, the microphone on the computer picks up very, very loud. So I apologize, but yeah.
Okay, thank you again for your
Good
time.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Jerry.
You bet.
Is that the only agenda item?
That's it.
Yeah, this is not a regular meeting
This was just
This is
the,
a special meeting.
to talk about this.
If any of you want to stay, that's fine with me. I don't care.
Actually, I think I would rather go back and watch the State of the Union.
oh,
Yes.
God.
I would like to do that too. As soon as possible.
I know.
It's also
Thank
Canada.
you again.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
But
Take care.
Dave's taping them, so.
Yeah, it's going okay.
Okay, so we have to make a decision as whether or not the Conservation Commission is going to do anything about this warrant article, or whether we're just going to let it go to the public to decide, or whether we need to put something beyond what has already been put out by Mr. Mursky and Mr. Jennings, who is putting out some of his information onto the listserv. So, what do you think, Jay?
Well, I mean, what attracted me to the village plan obviously was the 80-20 ratio. And also the ability to, you know, use the land for agriculture, forestry, and purposes like that. The lack of specificity is definitely a problem. You know, I'm not crazy about, I mean, again, you know, those two pieces were really what attracted me to the fact that I think it's important. It would have been nice to keep it. But again, as you explained, Kate, you know, the only way we're gonna do that is to come up with a new one and eliminate this one, correct?
Or just keep it in?
Or just keep it in, but is that gonna cause some
Well, that's
problems down the road?
speculation too,
Yeah.
in some way. Go ahead.
So that's the way I feel. I think that was a good explanation. I mean, yeah, I like the idea of 80-20 and a little broader land use. That's attractive to me. And I'm sure that's why that was put in there too, correct? I mean, I don't have any knowledge of the history of that. You mentioned having some knowledge of the history of the alternate plan, right, Sue?
Well, yeah, and the plan was like, take square plat and your village is corner. The rest of it is open. And, you know, I don't remember any discussion about access and use,
Mm.
but the idea of even further condensing the development, 20% of the land, was attractive because it allows access for wildlife. I don't recall any presumption that the community would be able to use that space. But from a sheer wildlife perspective. I mean, it's like my land. I have almost 6 acres. My house is on one little tiny piece that's not even an acre, and the rest is all open land, contiguous to other big tracts of land. And that was my envisionment of the village approve on a better village plan ordinance, it doesn't open us up to potential liabilities that adopting the state.
One thing I'm not familiar with or comfortable with is how, we apply these plans. That's one thing I really, because I'm not involved in parts of government, I'm not. So the cluster says a minimum of 50, and the village says it has to be 80-20. When it comes down to what's gonna really happen, how is that determined?
That goes before the planning and zoning.
So.
Well,
That has to be approved.
Right, it has to be approved. So, it would be debated, and then they would either pick one or the other.
Well, of a developer wouldn't have to necessarily do both. Developer could come in and say. I
But the
wanna
town's
do-
gonna approve it, though. The town's
Right.
gonna say,
Right, but
this
they-
is the way it's gonna be.
The developer could come in and say, I want to do another Lakeview condos. That's a cluster
Correct.
development. There's a whole bunch of land that they own in the homeowners association.
But the town has the right, and with two plans, they could say, okay, you gotta follow the village plan.
A developer isn't going to produce two plans.
No, but the town can restrict the developer to what they're gonna do.
No.
No, they can't.
No, if I'm a developer, I'm going to come to you and say, this is what I want to do. And I'm using the cluster plan or I'm using the village plan.
As long as he's following all the ordinances, he will be allowed to do that.
Okay,
There are certain setbacks and things.
okay.
This is where having a good planning and zoning administrator is really helpful, and I think we've come a long way in that area. A good example is White River had a large multi-story development, which was very close to the sidewalk, and their administrator was pretty talented, still is, and made a suggestion that really improved the downtown walkability, right? So it wasn't a requirement, but you can have those conversations up front, but there's no guarantee. I would cite the dollar store here. The dollar store didn't comply, didn't put in a road facing window per our zoning, and then they put a window in that's not clear because nobody wrote a rule about what a window was.
Mm.
So, and it's that nitpicky, unfortunately, and land use boards often don't win in New Hampshire. They seem to be losing more and more often. I think that's the big concern, right? Because everybody wants to work together. It's just how do we make it so that it is enforceable and it protects the way of life we all have here together.
okay, so we're getting off the
Yeah, so we see in,
decision that I need to hear from you.
okay,
Sue, you're saying
are you supporting us doing
you
something?
don't want to, I mean, we have to stick to what the article says. The article is
Right.
asking the citizens to eliminate the alternate village plan.
And I would recommend that we keep the alternate village plan and come up with a better alternative.
We have to stick to one. We're either going to have to recommend that the people vote no, or we have to be silent or say that they vote yes. We can't say, well, we're going to have this or we're going to have that. This is a single warrant article.
Well, it sounds like Kate is saying that we are not allowed by law as a board to come up with a position like that.
Well, we can recommend, just as the planning board made a recommendation, the conservation commission can make a recommendation. It's just the
check
way
that
we
out.
say
Is
it.
that
You
correct?
can't say vote no. I think you could vote individually to recommend or not recommend. That is what other boards do.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be the idea. We're not telling people how to vote. We're actually providing better information. I mean, Mr. Frack's comment about the choice of words is immaterial. It's on the warrant that it's redundant, and there's no way of getting that off of the
No,
warrant.
it's not on the warrant.
It is too.
No, it is not. It is in.
The description of the planning board's recommendation says that we recommend you vote no because
Hmm.
it is redundant.
There is a difference between the warrants and the narrative, and it is a very important legal.
That's right, but the
The
warrant
warrant
is,
is the legal piece of paper you vote on with the article, and there is prescribed legal language, and the narrative is what you are referencing.
But the narrative is recommending that the people finish or eliminate the alternate village plan. That's my point. So the Conservation Commission has the authority to recommend that they don't. And that's basically what we want to know, is you want to go on record as recommending against eliminating the alternate village plan? Or do you want to say, just be silent?
I'm gonna vote to say I'll be silent,
I
because,
would too.
yeah, I learned a lot today, and just the lack of specificity seems to be problematic in the village plan, so I would be silent.
I would be silent.
Okay, that's all we needed to know. Thank you very much. Coming.
It was a
Thanks
learning
for bringing
experience.
this to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I mean,
It's an incredibly important issue, and I think we're all ending up feeling stymied and frustrated.
No, I think it was a good process.
Yes,
Very good process, Gary.
what's important is a consensus from the committee. That's what we've had, and that's what we'll do. There will be nothing sent then to any place regarding the Conservation Commission's view on this article.
so moved.
Yes, you, second.
Favor of adjournment.
Second, I,
I think Jerry's-
So on,
you
on
don't have this down, Bert.
3rd of March, this Wednesday, we have another
Thursday.
Thursday, rather.
Regular meeting.
Normal,
Regular.
normal meeting period.
Yes.
But
We
I
will
will
have
not-
another meeting here.
Yeah, and you have a quorum.
I will have a quorum then because Dolores struck off and Shirley Green will be there.
Cool, very good.
All right.
Sure, would you like these? This is all the pieces.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Next one, community building.
I know.
My poor mom.
To see how the,
Recording ends up over there. I recall one meeting that I was in, and it was very bad.
it was looking pretty good on the Zoom.
Yeah, I've been taking, because my poor mom is having night